$22,000 a year. From a quarter acre, no permits, no inspections, no livestock license, and your neighbors think you just really like being outside. What's actually back there is a quarter acre. That's it, a quarter acre, the same size as the lot most of your neighbors are mowing grass on now, quietly generating $22,000 a year. Not a projection, not a could theoretically. Before we go anywhere, subscribe and turn on notifications, because this channel breaks down one complete backyard income system every single week. This isn't a list of 7 random side hustles. These 7 systems feed each other, literally. In some cases, the water from one becomes the fertilizer for the next. By the time we get to System 7, your costs are falling while your income is climbing, and that's not luck. That's the design. Real numbers. Real setups. No theory. Let's go inside the fence. Before we walk through a single system, you need to understand why this works, because the reason most people never build something like this has nothing to do with money or space. It's the fear that their HOA, their city, or a nosy neighbor will shut it down before it starts. Here's the part almost nobody explains clearly. Most municipal ordinances and HOA covenants are written around one narrow category of animals: chickens, goats, pigs, cattle, horses. The people who drafted those rules decades ago were not thinking about fish living inside a repurposed shipping tote. They were not thinking about a bin of land snails tucked into a shaded corner. They were not thinking about a copper still quietly turning lavender into oil in a garage or seed packets drying on a shelf. Aquaculture in a contained tank, invertebrate farming, plant distillation, and seed production almost never appear anywhere in a residential zoning code, because the people who wrote it simply never imagined a quarter acre could hold all of this at once. Every system on this list was chosen against 2 hard filters. First, it has to generate real, verifiable income. Not a hypothetical, not you could sell this on Etsy if you wanted to, but an actual documented price point people are already paying. Second, it has to be physically invisible from any street-facing angle of a standard suburban or semi-rural quarter acre. If a system failed either test, it got cut before it ever made this list. There's a second reason this matters beyond just staying under the radar of a complaint. Ordinances change slower than markets do. The buyers for these products, specialty grocers, restaurants, fiber artists, aquarium collectors, perfumers, seed libraries, are already out there today, already paying these prices to somebody. The only question is whether that somebody is you or a supplier 3 states away shipping in a box. Every system on this list exists because a real buyer already exists for it. Nothing here depends on you creating a market from scratch, and nothing here depends on convincing your neighborhood that backyard income is normal before you're allowed to start. 7 systems survived. Let's start with the one that becomes the water source for almost everything else on this property. System 1. Tilapia in IBC tote systems. The foundation. Income range: $350 to $550 a month. Startup cost: $250 to $400 for 2 or 3 food-grade IBC totes, a pump, and starter fingerlings. Time commitment: 15 to 20 minutes a day, space required. A covered corner of a shed or a simple lean-to, roughly 40 square feet for 3 totes, an IBC tote, the kind of 275-gallon food-grade plastic container used to ship syrups and industrial liquids, is one of the cheapest, most overlooked fish farming vessels that exists, and most people drive past a stack of them at a salvage yard without ever imagining what they could become. Cut the top off, plumb in a simple air pump and a basic filtration loop, and you've got a self-contained aquaculture tank that can raise tilapia to harvest weight in 6 to 8 months, completely hidden behind a shed wall or under a lean-to roof. Tilapia are the standard choice for a reason. They tolerate imperfect water conditions better than almost any other food fish, grow fast, and there's a steady, unglamorous demand for them from ethnic grocers, live fish markets, and home cooks who specifically want a fish they know was raised close by rather than shipped frozen from overseas. A mature tilapia dresses out at £1 to £1.50, and live or fresh-dressed fish sell for $5 to $8 a pound direct to a buyer, with live sales to specialty markets sometimes running higher. 3 totes staggered on a rotating stocking schedule so you're not harvesting everything at once. Keep a steady monthly supply moving rather than one giant harvest that floods your own market. And here's the part that makes this the foundation of the entire property: the water. Fish waste turns tank water into a nutrient-dense liquid fertilizer, and instead of dumping that water down a drain, it becomes the lifeblood of System 2. Sourcing fingerlings is as simple as finding a regional tilapia hatchery. Most states with any aquaculture activity have at least one within a few hours' drive, and many ship live fingerlings by mail. Finding buyers means introducing yourself to any market that already carries live or fresh whole fish. Most are actively looking for a closer, fresher source than their current supplier and will happily test a small batch before committing to a standing order. System 2. Aquaponics, turning fish water into a second income range. $300 to $550 a month. Startup cost: $200 to $350 for grow beds, media, and plumbing, assuming the fish system already exists. Time commitment: 15 minutes a day. Space required: a greenhouse frame or covered raised bed section. Roughly 60 square feet. Aquaponics is simply the practice of routing nutrient-rich water from a fish system through a bed of gravel or clay media where plants grow, letting the plant roots filter and clean the water before it cycles back to the fish. On this quarter-acre, that water is coming straight from System 1's Tilapia totes, which means the fertilizer bill for this entire growing system is effectively zero. The fish are paying for it as a byproduct of simply living. Leafy greens are the fastest, most reliable crop in an aquaponic bed. Lettuce, basil, watercress, and Swiss chard all thrive in the constant nutrient flow and grow noticeably faster than the same crop in soil, since the roots never have to search for food. A single 4x8 grow bed can cycle through a full head lettuce harvest every 4 to 5 weeks, and restaurants specifically seek out aquaponic greens because the flavor and texture tend to be more consistent than field-grown produce, and because locally grown, pesticide-free is an easy line for a chef to put on a menu. Selling into this market works the same way as any other direct-to-restaurant relationship. A standing weekly delivery of a set volume, priced at $4 to $7 a pound depending on the variety, beats a farmer's market table for consistency and takes almost no additional time once the account is set up. Trimmed leaves and any produce that doesn't make the cut don't go to waste. They become feed for the snails in System 3 and supplemental greens for the rabbits, providing fiber in System 7. The one thing worth being upfront about: aquaponics has the steepest initial learning curve of anything on this list, because you're balancing 2 living systems, fish and plants, against each other rather than managing them separately. Give yourself a full season to get the nitrogen cycle and pH balance dialed in before you count on this system for real income, and don't be discouraged if your first few weeks look more like troubleshooting than harvesting. System 3. Snail farming, heliculture. The gourmet loophole income range: $200 to $350 a month. Startup cost: $100 to $200 for a contained enclosure and starter breeding stock. Time commitment: 15 minutes a day. Space required: a shaded humid pen or raised bin, roughly 25 square feet. Heliculture, the formal name for farming land snails for food, is one of the strangest sounding, highest margin systems you can run on a small footprint, and it survives almost every livestock ordinance, because snails, quite simply, were never on anyone's radar when those ordinances were written. A contained outdoor pen or an indoor bin with a loose, moisture-retentive substrate and a steady diet of lettuce, cabbage, and calcium supplement is all a breeding colony needs. Escargot demand in the United States is almost entirely served by imports, which means a fresh, live, or prepared local product commands a real premium from the same independently owned restaurants already buying your microgreens and aquaponic lettuce. Live snails at harvest size sell for $2 to $4 each to specialty buyers, and a single well-managed breeding colony can produce hundreds of harvest-ready snails across a season, since a mature snail can lay dozens of eggs multiple times a year in the right conditions. There's a second, less obvious income stream here, too. Snail mucus. The cosmetic industry has built a genuine niche around snail secretion filtrate for skincare, and small-batch collectors, cosmetic formulators, soap makers, and boutique skincare brands pay a real price for an ethically harvested, small-scale source rather than relying entirely on large commercial farms overseas. It's a byproduct almost nobody thinks to sell, which is exactly why it's worth mentioning here. Snails are near silent, produce no odor if the enclosure is kept clean, and need no fencing that would draw a second look from anyone walking past. Trimmed greens from the aquaponic beds and any produce culls from the property become their primary feed source, which means this system's input costs stay close to nothing once the rest of the property is running. System 4. Angora rabbit fiber production. The quiet textile system. Income range: $250 to $450 a month startup cost. $200 to $350 for hutches and a starter pair, time commitment. 20 minutes a day plus a dedicated shearing session every 10 to 12 weeks. Space required: a 6 by 8 foot hutch bank tucked against the back fence. Angora rabbits look, at a glance, like any other backyard rabbit, which is exactly why this system stays invisible. The difference is what they produce: an extremely fine, soft fiber that grows continuously and gets harvested every 10 to 12 weeks through shearing or gentle plucking, rather than the animal ever being processed for meat. A single Angora rabbit produces 12 to 16 ounces of raw fiber per year, and raw or cleaned Angora wool sells to hand spinners and fiber artists at $6 to $10 an ounce. A price point that reflects just how prized this fiber is compared to sheep's wool, since it's warmer, lighter, and softer than almost anything else available to a home spinner. A small colony of 6 to 8 rabbits, which fits comfortably in the same hutch footprint as a standard meat rabbit operation, produces enough raw fiber annually to keep a steady stream of product moving to buyers who are actively seeking out small-batch, ethically raised fiber rather than mass-produced wool. Selling doesn't require finding a huge market. Fiber guilds, hand-spinning clubs, and online fiber arts communities are small but intensely loyal, and a breeder known for well-cared-for animals and clean, well-sorted fiber builds a waiting list rather than needing to hustle for buyers. Some producers add a second income layer by spinning a portion of the raw fiber into yarn themselves, which multiplies the per-ounce price several times over for those willing to learn the craft. The manure from this system, like the rabbit systems on any homestead, is a valuable, ready-to-use soil amendment, in this case, feeding directly into the seed-saving beds in System 6 without ever needing to be composted first. System 5. Essential oil and hydrosol distillation, turning herbs into 2 products at once. Income range: $250 to $450 a month. Startup cost: $150 to $300 for a small copper or stainless steel alembic still time commitment, a few hours per distillation run, roughly once a week during the growing season. Space required: a garage or shed corner with ventilation, 15 square feet. This is the system that takes a crop most people would just dry and bag and turns it into 2 separate high-value products instead. Lavender, mint, rosemary, and lemon balm, all easy to grow in a small dedicated bed or container row, get loaded into a small steam distillation still, and the process produces both an essential oil, which floats to the top and gets separated, and a hydrosol, the fragrant plant water left underneath, which is its own separate, sellable product rather than a byproduct to discard. Essential oils sell to soap makers, candle makers, and small skincare formulators at $15 to $40 an ounce depending on the plant, with lavender and rosemary being the most consistent sellers because of how widely they're used across the natural products space. Hydrosols, sold as facial toners, linen sprays, and cooking ingredients, sell for $8 to $15 for a 4-ounce bottle. And because a single distillation run produces significantly more hydrosol by volume than oil, this leftover product frequently ends up matching or exceeding the oil income from the same batch of plant material. A single small still can process a few pounds of fresh plant material per run, which a modest dedicated herb bed can supply on a rotating weekly basis throughout the growing season. Spent plant material after distillation doesn't go to waste either. It composts quickly and makes excellent mulch for the same bed it came from, or bedding material for the Angora rabbits in System 4. Selling both products works best through the same channels: local soap and candle makers, small skincare brands, and increasingly, direct-to-consumer sales through a simple online storefront once you've got a consistent supply and a recognizable label. Unlike most of the other systems on this list, this one rewards patience. A still run takes real hands-on time, but the per-ounce value of the finished product is higher than almost anything else this quarter-acre produces. System 6. Seed Saving and Heirloom. Seed banking, selling what would otherwise be thrown away. Income range: $130 to $300 a month. Startup cost: under $100 for envelopes, labels, and basic drying screens. Time commitment: 15 minutes a day during harvest season, minimal the rest of the year space required. A small dedicated seed crop bed plus a cool, dry storage shelf, 30 square feet combined. Every garden produces seed whether you plan for it or not. The tomato that goes soft on the vine, the lettuce that bolts in the summer heat, the bean pod left on the plant too long. Most home gardeners treat this as a failure. On this quarter acre, it's treated as raw material for one of the highest margin products on the entire list, because a properly saved, cleaned, and packaged heirloom seed sells for far more per ounce than the vegetable it came from ever would. A dedicated seed crop bed, planted specifically with open-pollinated heirloom varieties rather than hybrids, lets you save true-to-type seed year after year. Tomatoes, peppers, beans, and squash are the easiest and most in-demand starting points. Once cleaned, dried, and packaged into small envelopes, heirloom seed sells for $3 to $6 a packet direct to gardeners through a simple online listing or a local seed swap. And rare or regionally significant varieties can command significantly more from collectors and small seed libraries actively trying to preserve genetic diversity that's disappearing from commercial catalogs. This system pairs naturally with the herb distillation and aquaponic beds on the property, since any plant allowed to go fully to seed rather than being harvested young becomes a second product instead of a wasted crop. A single well-managed heirloom tomato plant can produce enough seed for dozens of packets, all from a plant that would otherwise have simply been eaten or composted. The buyer base here skews toward people who care as much about the story as the product. Small seed libraries, permaculture communities, and gardeners specifically hunting for a variety they can't find at a big-box garden center. A little bit of documentation, where the variety originated, how it performs, what makes it worth growing, turns a $4 seed packet into something a customer comes back for year after year. System 7. Koi and ornamental fish breeding. The highest value per square foot. Income range: $150 to $400 a month. Startup cost: $300 to $500 for a small preformed pond or stock tank and breeding pairs. Time commitment: 15 minutes a day. Space required: a screened, privacy-fenced corner, 30 to 50 square feet. This is the system that closes out the list because it's the one with the widest income range and the most upside if you get good at it. Koi and other ornamental pond fish are bred and sold not by the pound like tilapia, but by the individual fish, and quality specimens with strong color patterns can sell for anywhere from $20 for a young, unremarkable fish to several $100s for a fish with exceptional coloring and pattern development. A small breeding setup, a single preformed pond, or even a large stock tank with proper filtration, hidden behind privacy screening or tucked against a fence line, can produce dozens of young fish, called fry, from a single breeding pair in a season. Most of those fry sell at modest prices to local pet stores and hobbyists, but the handful that develop exceptional color and pattern as they mature become the ones that fund the rest of the batch many times over. Buyers here are almost entirely hobbyists and specialty aquarium or pond shops, and the relationship building looks a lot like the fiber arts community in System 4. Your koi and pond fish keepers tend to be deeply engaged hobbyists who follow specific breeders, attend swap meets, and are willing to pay well for a fish with documented lineage and good coloration. A pond tucked behind a privacy screen is also, frankly, one of the more pleasant systems to maintain on this entire list. The daily check is closer to enjoying a hobby than doing a chore. Water from routine partial changes on this system, rich in fish waste, becomes another free nutrient source for the seed-saving beds, closing one more loop on a property where almost nothing gets thrown away without being used first. The math: how 7 small systems become $22,000 a year. Let's add it up the way it actually plays out over 12 months, using the midpoint of each range. Tilapia in IBC totes, $450 per month to $5,400 per year. Aquaponic screens, $325 per month to $3,900 per year. Snail farming, $225 per month to $2,700 per year. Angora rabbit fiber, $275 per month to $3,300 per year. Essential oil and hydrosol distillation, $275 per month to $3,300 per year. Seed saving and heirloom seed banking, $133 per month to $1,600 per year. Koi and ornamental fish breeding, $150 per month to $1,800 per year. Total, roughly $22,000 a year, just under $1,833 a month, from a quarter acre that looks from the street like nothing more than a fence, a shed, and maybe a greenhouse. None of these numbers depend on each other to hit their individual target, but they compound. The tilapia water fertilizes the aquaponic beds for free. The aquaponic trimmings feed the snails and supplement the rabbits. The rabbit manure feeds the seed-saving beds. The koi pond's wastewater does the same. Spent distillation material becomes rabbit bedding and garden mulch. By the time you're running all 7 systems simultaneously, your combined costs are falling while your combined output is climbing. And that's not an accident. That's the design. I want to be honest with you about how this actually came together because it wasn't clean and it wasn't fast. 3 years ago, my quarter acre was just a yard. A nice yard, I'll give myself that, Amin, but a yard that cost me money every single month instead of making me any. I had a small vegetable garden on the side that got tended maybe twice a week, and a whole back corner that was just grass I was mowing for no reason other than habit. I was skeptical that any of this would actually add up to real money. Fish in a plastic tote sounded like a joke. Farming snails on purpose sounded like something I'd only ever seen mentioned as a novelty. But I started with the smallest, cheapest piece. 2 IBC totes I picked up secondhand for almost nothing from a local bottling company clearing out its yard, and figured if it failed, I'd lose a weekend and not much else. It didn't fail. Within a few months, I had a standing relationship with a small grocer who wanted fresh tilapia more reliably than his current supplier could manage, and the tank water I'd been dumping out was clearly too nutrient-rich to waste, which is what pushed me into building the first aquaponic grow bed the following spring. Watching lettuce grow visibly faster in that bed than anything in my soil garden was the moment I stopped thinking of this as a hobby. The snail pen came next, mostly out of curiosity after reading about how underserved the domestic escargot market actually was. The Angora rabbits followed a season after that. A breeder 2 towns over was downsizing, and I took 4 rabbits off her hands for next to nothing, with zero plan beyond how hard can spinning fiber really be. The still came from an estate sale, of all places, and sat in my garage for 4 months before I worked up the nerve to run my first batch of lavender through it. The seed-saving bed started almost by accident, the same way most good systems do. I simply stopped throwing away the seed from my best-performing tomato plant and started saving it on purpose instead. The koi pond was the last piece, and I'll admit it was more indulgence than plan at first. But once I saw what a well-colored young fish could actually sell for compared to what it cost to raise, it stopped being a hobby expense and started being one of the better numbers on the whole property. It took close to 2.5 years to get all 7 systems running the way I described them to you today. Not because any single system was hard, but because I built them one at a time, let each one stabilize, and only added the next once the current one wasn't taking up mental energy anymore. That's the part nobody tells you when they show you a finished setup like this. It looks like it all came together at once, but it never does. It's built in layers, the same way the systems themselves feed into each other. There were setbacks in there too, and I'd be doing you a disservice not to mention them. My first tilapia batch crashed hard when a pump failed overnight, and I lost most of a tote before I noticed. That was an expensive lesson in backup aeration that I haven't needed to relearn since. My first distillation run scorched a batch of lavender because I rushed the heat instead of being patient with it. None of that means the systems don't work. It means they work the way anything real works, with a learning curve, a few expensive lessons, and a refusal to quit the first time something goes sideways. 5 mistakes that quietly kill a setup like this. Before you start building any of this on your own quarter-acre, let me save you from the mistakes I watched other people make and made myself more than once. Mistake 1. Building all 7 systems in the same season. This is the single fastest way to burn out and abandon the entire project by August. Each system individually takes 15 to 20 minutes a day, which sounds manageable, until you're running all 7 at once and suddenly you're spending 2 hours a day on chores instead of the 10 minutes per system you budgeted for. Start with one system. Let it run smoothly for 6 to 8 weeks, and only then add the next. Within 2 years, you'll have the full stack running without ever feeling overwhelmed by it. Mistake 2. Ignoring your local ordinance instead of actually reading it. I said earlier that most of these systems fall outside typical livestock and agriculture classifications, and that's true, but typical isn't universal, and aquaculture in particular sometimes has its own separate permitting rules depending on volume and whether you're selling live fish versus processed. Before you put a single tote, pond, or still in place, pull your actual municipal code and read the sections on animals, water systems, and home occupations. It takes 20 minutes, and it's the difference between building something durable and getting a certified letter 8 months in telling you to tear it out. Mistake 3. Treating the byproducts as waste instead of income. This is the mistake that costs people the most money without them ever realizing it. Tank water, spent plant material, rabbit manure, unsold fry, all of it has either a buyer or a use elsewhere on the property if you look for one. The people who build a setup like this and only ever count the main product, the fish meat, the fiber, the oil, are leaving a real chunk of the total income sitting in a drain or a compost pile. And I want to hear from you in the comments. Which of these 7 systems would you start with first? The tilapia totes, because the startup cost is lower than almost anything else on this list? The koi pond, because it doubles as something genuinely enjoyable to maintain? Or the seed bank, because it starts with plants you might already be growing? Tell me below. I read every single comment, and your answer might be exactly what convinces someone else reading this that their own quiet backyard is worth more than they've been giving it credit for. Your quarter acre is enough. It always was. It just needed the right systems, stacked the right way, to prove it.